They tried to make me disappear. 3 years ago, the Steele family threw me out of the only home I'd ever known, telling me I was nothing, nobody, a charity case who'd finally outstayed her welcome. They thought that was the end of my story. They thought I'd fade away quietly, grateful for the years they'd tolerated my presence. They were wrong. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Now, let's continue. Standing in their kitchen tonight, wearing the servant's uniform they'd forced on me, watching my billionaire husband's private jet land on their perfect lawn with FBI agents on board, I realized something powerful. The people who tried to erase you never expect you to come back as the one holding the pen. This is the story of how I rewrote the ending they thought they'd written for me. Ma'am, your husband has just landed on the front lawn. Those words stopped everything. The catering staff froze mid-service, champagne bottles suspended in mid-pour. The classical quartet hit a sour note that echoed through the ballroom. Through the kitchen window, I watched a sleek Gulfstream G650 descend onto the Steele estate's manicured gardens, its wheels crushing the rose bushes Victoria Steele had spent $50,000 cultivating. Petals exploded into the air like confetti at a funeral, white and pink fragments scattering across perfectly maintained grass that had probably never seen anything more dramatic than a garden party. The security guard wasn't talking to my former adoptive father, Richard Steele, the host of tonight's charity gala. He wasn't talking to Jennifer and Philip, who'd spent the last hour accepting congratulations for their family's philanthropic legacy, posing for photographs with local politicians and business leaders who had no idea they were celebrating a lie. He was talking to me, the black girl in the server's uniform, holding a tray of dirty champagne glasses, trying to stay invisible in the kitchen of the mansion that used to be my home. You know what they say about karma? Sometimes it doesn't just knock on your door. Sometimes it tears up your lawn in a private jet, bringing federal agents and a paper trail that turns your perfect life into a crime scene. My name is Danielle Foster, and this is the story of how I went from being the unwanted adopted daughter thrown out with nothing but a backpack and a mysterious key, to standing in my former family's kitchen while my billionaire husband arrived like an avenging angel with the FBI, ready to expose the people who raised me as the criminals they'd always been. But before I tell you about the look on Victoria Steele's face when handcuffs closed around her wrists at her own charity gala, let me ask you something. How's your day going? Where are you watching this from? I hope wherever you are, you're somewhere that feels safe, because safety is something I spent most of my life searching for, somewhere I could stop performing and just exist. If you're someone who's ever felt like you were playing a part in someone else's story, like you were always one mistake away from losing everything, like you had to earn the love that should have been freely given, then this story is for you. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about family, justice, and the difference between being chosen and being used. The jet's engines were still winding down when chaos erupted around me. Linda, the catering manager, grabbed my arm with fingers that dug into my skin. "What is happening? Did you know about this?" I pulled free gently, setting down my tray with hands that were steadier than they had any right to be. "I had no idea," I lied, watching through the window as the aircraft door began to open. 3 years of planning, 3 years of gathering evidence, 3 years of building a case that would bring this entire empire crashing down, and I'd become a very good liar when I needed to be. Through the doorway leading to the ballroom, I could see the guests pressing toward the windows, their champagne flutes forgotten as they watched the spectacle unfolding on the front lawn. Someone had turned off the music. Voices rose in confused chatter. the carefully orchestrated elegance of the steel foundation gala dissolving into something raw and real. Richard Steele's face had gone white, his usually confident posture crumbling as he stared out at the jet that had just destroyed his wife's prize-winning rose garden. Victoria stood frozen beside him, one hand pressed to her throat, and even from this distance I could see her mind racing, trying to calculate how to turn this disruption into something she could control. But there was no controlling what was coming. The jet door opened fully, stairs deploying with mechanical precision. A man in a perfectly tailored navy suit began descending, his movements calm and assured, despite having just made an entrance that would be trending on social media within minutes. Behind him, other figures emerged, men and women in dark suits with badges visible even from here, federal agents, every single one of them carrying boxes of documents and equipment. Derek had kept his promise. He'd said he would make an entrance they'd never forget, and watching him walk across that destroyed garden with the afternoon sun glinting off his jet, I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about justice for every child who'd been used the way I'd been used. "Ma'am?" The security guard's voice crackled through my earpiece again, more urgent now. "We have multiple individuals approaching the residence. They're identifying themselves as federal agents. What should I tell them?" Before I could respond, I heard it, the sharp click of expensive heels on tile, moving fast. Victoria's heels. I'd know that sound anywhere after 18 years of listening to it echo through these halls, usually coming to find me after I'd done something that needed correcting, some way I'd failed to properly represent the Steele name. The kitchen door swung open with enough force to bang against the wall. Victoria stood in the doorway, her face flushed with rage, her careful composure completely shattered, her eyes locked on me. And for a moment I saw genuine fear flicker across her features before anger replaced it. "You," she hissed, taking 3 quick steps toward me. "What did you do?" I straightened my spine, feeling the weight of Elena's key beneath my uniform, the same key I'd worn for 16 years without understanding its significance. The same key that had unlocked a safety deposit box full of evidence 3 years ago. The same evidence that was about to walk through the front door in the hands of federal agents. "I didn't do anything, Mrs. Steele," I said quietly, using the formal address I'd always been required to use, the one that reminded me I'd never really been family. "But I think you're about to have some visitors who'd like to talk to you about your foundation's accounting practices." Her hand rose, and for a split second I thought she might actually strike me. But then the front doorbell rang, a sound that carried clearly even into the kitchen. Once, twice, 3 times, insistent, official. Victoria's hand dropped. Her face went from flushed to pale in an instant. "That'll be my husband," I said, and I couldn't quite keep the satisfaction out of my voice. "He's very particular about proper introductions. You should probably answer the door." The story was just getting started, and Victoria Steele was about to learn what happens when you build an empire on stolen childhoods and forged documents. She was about to learn that some people don't disappear when you throw them away. Some people come back with federal agents and evidence that destroys everything you've built on lies. But to understand how I ended up standing in that kitchen with federal agents at the door, you need to know where it all started. You need to know about the day a 6-year-old girl lost everything and thought she'd found it again. 18 years ago, I sat in a plastic chair in the pediatric ward waiting room at Mercy General Hospital, clutching a stuffed rabbit my mother had won for me at a carnival 2 weeks earlier. It was yellow with floppy ears, and it smelled like her perfume because she'd kept it on her bed while she was sick. The doctors had promised she'd get better. They'd used words like treatable and manageable and routine procedure. They were wrong. The adults around me kept trying to be kind. A nurse brought me juice boxes I couldn't drink. A social worker asked questions I couldn't answer. Everyone kept saying my mother was in a better place now, which made no sense because the best place was here, with me, like she'd always been. That's when Elena Steele found me. She'd been volunteering in the pediatric ward for years, reading stories to sick children, bringing books and toys, being the kind of grandmother figure that hospitals always needed. She was in her late 60s then, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant twist, and eyes that seemed to actually see me instead of looking through me like everyone else had been doing all day. She didn't say any of the things the other adults had said. She just sat down in the plastic chair next to mine, close enough that our shoulders touched, and stayed quiet while I cried into my rabbit's yellow fur. When I finally looked up at her with swollen, burning eyes, she pulled a tissue from her purse and handed it to me. "I knew your mother," she said softly. "Lydia was very brave, and she loved you more than anything in the world." Those were the first words anyone had said that felt true. "What happens to me now?" I asked, my voice small and scratchy from crying. Elena's hand found mine, warm and steady. "Would you like to come home with me? Just for tonight. Just until we figure out what happens next." I nodded, because I didn't know what else to do. Because she'd known my mother's name. Because her hand was warm, and mine was cold, and I didn't want to be alone in that waiting room anymore. That night turned into a week. A week turned into a month, and a month turned into forever. The Steele estate was like something out of a storybook, the kind of place I'd only seen in movies, a sprawling mansion with white columns and tall windows that caught the sunset, surrounded by gardens that seemed to go on forever. As we drove up the long driveway that first evening, I pressed my face against the car window and wondered if I was dreaming. "It's very big," I whispered. Elena smiled. "It is, but don't let that scare you. A house is just walls and windows. What matters is the people inside." She was right about the house being big. She was wrong about what mattered being the people inside. Richard Steele was Elena's son, a real estate developer who spent most of his time in his office or traveling for business. When Elena brought me through the front door that first night, he was standing in the foyer reviewing contracts, barely glancing up as we entered. "Richard, this is Danielle," Elena said, her hand warm on my shoulder. "Lydia Foster's daughter. She'll be staying with us for a while." Richard's eyes flickered over me for maybe 2 seconds before returning to his papers. "That's fine, Mother. Whatever you think is best." He didn't ask my name, didn't ask how old I was, didn't ask anything at all. Victoria appeared at the top of the grand staircase, descending with the kind of careful grace that suggested every movement was calculated. She was beautiful in a cold way, like a diamond, all sharp edges and glittering surfaces. Her smile when she looked at me didn't reach her eyes. "Elena, darling, you didn't mention we'd be having a house guest." Her voice was sweet, but something about it made my hand tighten around my rabbit. "Not a guest, Victoria. Danielle will be staying with us. Her mother passed away today, and she has nowhere else to go." Victoria's smile tightened. "How charitable of you. I'm sure we can make arrangements for the appropriate services to handle placement." "She's not being placed anywhere." Elena's voice was firm in a way I hadn't heard before. "She's staying here, with me." The silence that followed felt heavy, like something pressing down on my chest. I wanted to disappear, to somehow make myself small enough that no one would notice me standing there. "Mom?" A teenage girl appeared in the hallway, maybe 15 or 16, with Victoria's sharp features and the same calculating look in her eyes. "What's going on?" "Jennifer, this is Danielle. She'll be staying with us for a while." Jennifer looked me up and down, her nose wrinkling slightly. "She doesn't even look like us." "Jennifer!" Elena's voice was sharp. "That's rude and unkind. Apologize." "Sorry," Jennifer muttered, not sounding sorry at all. She turned and walked away, her footsteps loud on the hardwood floors. A boy around 17 lounged in the doorway of what looked like a library, watching the scene with detached interest. Philip, I would learn later, Elena's other grandchild. He caught my eye briefly, then looked away as if I wasn't worth the effort of acknowledgement. That first night, Elena showed me to a bedroom that was bigger than the entire apartment I'd shared with my mother. It had bookshelves built into the walls, a window seat overlooking the gardens, and a bed with more pillows than I'd ever seen in one place. Everything was perfect and beautiful and felt nothing like home. "It's too nice," I whispered, afraid to touch anything. Elena knelt down to my level, her hands gentle on my shoulders. "Nothing is too nice for you, sweetheart. This is your room now, your space. You can put your things wherever you like." I didn't have any things except my rabbit and the clothes I'd been wearing when my mother went into the hospital 3 days earlier. Elena seemed to realize this at the same moment I did, because her eyes got sad. "We'll fix that tomorrow," she said softly. "Tonight, let's just get you settled." She stayed with me while I got ready for bed, helping me wash my face and brush my teeth like my mother used to do. When I climbed into the massive bed, feeling lost in all that space, Elena sat beside me and pulled a book from the nightstand. "Would you like me to read to you?" I nodded, clutching my rabbit, and Elena opened the book. Her voice was soothing, steady, turning the words into something safe. I didn't remember falling asleep, but I remembered the feeling of someone caring whether I was scared or lonely or sad. Over the next weeks, Elena became my anchor in a house that felt like a museum I wasn't supposed to touch. She taught me where things were, introduced me to the housekeeper and the gardener, made sure I understood that this was my home now, even when everything about the place seemed to say otherwise. Richard remained distant, a figure I saw at dinner sometimes, who asked vague questions about school but never waited for answers. Victoria was polite in that same cold way, always watching me like I was a problem she was waiting to solve. Jennifer made it clear I was an unwelcome intrusion, and Philip treated me like I was invisible. But Elena loved me, really loved me, in a way that felt like my mother's love, but different. Steadier somehow, safer. She read to me every night, books that were too advanced for most 6-year-olds. But she said I was special, that I understood things other children didn't. She bragged about me to her friends, celebrated every small achievement, hung my crayon drawings on her office walls like they were masterpieces. "You're exactly where you're meant to be, sweetheart," she would whisper during bedtime. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." When I turned 8, Elena gave me a gift that confused me, a silver chain with a small key attached, delicate and old-fashioned. "This is for when you're older," she said, fastening it around my neck. "When you need it, you'll know where it goes. Promise me you'll keep it safe." "What does it open?" I asked, touching the key with curious fingers. "Answers," Elena said mysteriously. "When you're ready for them." I didn't understand, but I promised. I wore that key every day for the next 16 years, a symbol of Elena's love and whatever secret she was keeping for me. 6 months after I first arrived at the Steele estate, Elena announced we were having a small ceremony, an adoption ceremony she called it, though she'd already explained to me that the legal paperwork was complicated, that there were things that needed to be sorted out, but that it didn't matter because I was hers now. The ceremony was held in the estate's garden, just family and a few of Elena's closest friends. I wore a white dress Elena had bought specially for the occasion, and I felt like a princess, like this was the moment when everything became official, when I truly became a Steele. Victoria stood beside Richard, her smile tight and controlled. As Elena pulled me into a hug, telling me I was hers now, forever, I heard Victoria lean close to her husband. "Elena's being sentimental," she whispered, thinking I couldn't hear. "We'll sort this out later." I didn't understand what she meant. I was 8 years old, wrapped in Elena's arms, being told I was loved and wanted and chosen. I didn't understand that some people could smile while planning your destruction. "You're mine now, Danielle," Elena said, holding me tight. "Forever." I believed her. I had no idea that forever had an expiration date, or that the key around my neck would eventually unlock the truth about why this family had never really wanted me at all. The years that followed that garden ceremony taught me a lesson I wish I'd never had to learn. You can live in a house full of people and still be completely alone. I threw myself into being perfect. If I could just be smart enough, accomplished enough, grateful enough, then surely the rest of the Steele family would love me the way Elena did. It became my mission, my obsession, the thing that drove me from the moment I woke up until I fell asleep, exhausted every night. By 3rd grade, I was bringing home straight A's on every report card. Elena would frame them, hang them in her office alongside my artwork and achievement certificates. She'd brag to her friends about my reading level, my test scores, my teachers' glowing comments. But at the dinner table, when she'd mention my latest academic success, Richard would nod absently and change the subject to Philip's basketball game or Jennifer's upcoming dance recital. Victoria would offer a tight smile and say something like, "How nice," in a tone that suggested it wasn't nice at all. My 10th birthday party was the first time I truly understood I was different. Elena had insisted on celebrating, inviting families from my school, setting up games in the garden. But while other children's birthdays felt like family celebrations, mine felt like an event Elena was hosting where I happened to be the theme. Richard left halfway through for a business call. Victoria supervised from a distance, making sure nothing was damaged. Jennifer and Philip disappeared to their rooms. The other parents kept giving me sympathetic looks that made my skin crawl, like they could see something I was still pretending not to notice. Christmas was worse. Every year, Elena would arrange for professional photos in the grand living room, the whole family dressed in coordinating outfits she'd carefully selected. And every year, I'd end up positioned on the edge of the frame, slightly separated from the others, not obviously excluded, but definitely apart. Years later, I'd see those photos displayed around the house and realize how easy it would be to crop me out entirely. Sometimes, in frames in Richard and Victoria's wing of the house, I had been cropped out, the incidents piled up like small cuts that never quite healed. Age 10, Victoria was supposed to pick me up from school after chess club. I waited outside for 2 hours, watching other children leave with their parents, trying not to cry as the sky grew dark. The school secretary finally called Elena, who arrived flustered and furious, wrapping me in a hug and demanding to know why Victoria hadn't come. "I forgot," Victoria said later, her voice flat and unapologetic. "I had a hair appointment." Elena's expression told me she didn't believe it was an accident, but nothing changed. The message was clear. I wasn't important enough to remember. Age 13, Jennifer's Sweet 16 was the social event of the season, held at an upscale country club with 200 guests. I'd asked if I could invite 2 friends from school, girls I'd been studying with, girls who actually seemed to like me. Victoria's response was delivered with surgical precision. "This is Jennifer's night, Danielle. Let's not make it about you." I spent the evening watching my sister celebrate, surrounded by her friends, while I sat alone at a table in the corner, wearing a dress Elena had bought me that everyone else seemed to think was too nice for someone like me to wear. Age 16, Richard was hosting a business dinner at the estate, important developers and city officials who could advance his latest project. Elena insisted I attend, dressed in my debate team blazer, ready to discuss my recent state championship. Richard introduced me to exactly one person that night. "This is Danielle," he said, his hand not quite touching my shoulder. "My mother's project. Elena's always had a soft spot for charity cases." The man had looked uncomfortable. I'd excused myself and hidden in my room for the rest of the evening, Elena's key pressing against my chest like a reminder that at least one person had chosen me on purpose. Age 18. I got into Yale, Princeton, and Stanford. Full scholarships to all three. Elena cried when I showed her the acceptance letters, pulling me into a hug and telling me how proud she was, how I was going to change the world. We celebrated with just the two of us, cake from my favorite bakery, sparkling cider in fancy glasses. That evening at dinner, when Elena announced my acceptances to the family, Victoria said, "How fortunate," and immediately pivoted to discussing Philip's new job at his father's company. Richard nodded and told Philip how proud he was to have him joining the family business. No one mentioned my name again for the rest of the meal. Philip's wedding, when I was 21, was the final proof I needed that I would never truly belong. I'd helped with planning, addressed invitations, showed up for dress fittings. But when it came time for family photos, the photographer kept positioning me further and further from the core group. Eventually, Victoria pulled me aside. "Dear, we're just doing immediate family for these shots. You understand?" I stood with the other guests and watched them pose together, a perfect family unit, with no space for the girl who'd lived in their house for 15 years. Through it all, I kept telling myself the same lie. If I could just be perfect enough, they'd love me. I graduated summa cum laude from high school. I volunteered at hospitals and homeless shelters. I won awards and competitions. I was never late, never rude, never anything but graciously grateful for every scrap of attention they threw my way. Elena saw what I was doing, the way I was exhausting myself trying to earn something that should have been freely given. "You don't have to earn love, darling," she'd tell me during our late-night conversations in her study. "Real love isn't transactional. You don't get more of it by being perfect." But Elena's love felt like the exception, not the rule. Without her, I had nothing. So I kept the key she'd given me around my neck, and I kept trying to be perfect, even though part of me knew I was running a race that had no finish line. The first crack in Elena's health appeared during my junior year of college. I came home for Thanksgiving and found her moving slower, getting tired more easily. She brushed off my concerns with the same warm smile she'd always had, but I could see something was wrong. By Christmas, she was seeing doctors regularly. By spring, I was coming home every weekend, driving 3 hours each way to sit with her, to read to her the way she'd once read to me, to hold her hand when the pain got bad. "There are things I need to tell you," she'd say during those visits, her voice urgent despite her weakness. "Things about your mother, about why you're really here." But every time she tried to explain, Victoria would appear. "She needs rest, Danielle, not emotional conversations. You're exhausting her with all these visits." The irony of Victoria suddenly caring about Elena's well-being wasn't lost on me, but I was 23 and still conditioned to defer to the adults in the family. Elena's death came suddenly, on a Tuesday morning in March, 3 days before my 24th birthday. A massive heart attack, the doctors said. Quick, relatively painless. She was 68 years old. I was in class when Richard called. I don't remember the drive home. Don't remember anything except the feeling that the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. When I arrived at the estate, Victoria met me at the door with practiced composure. "She had a good life," Victoria said, like that was supposed to comfort me. Like 68 years was enough. Like losing the only person who'd ever truly loved me was something I should accept gracefully. The funeral was large, attended by dozens of Elena's friends and colleagues, people whose lives she'd touched through her genuine kindness. I sat in the front row between Jennifer and Philip, feeling their resentment radiating off them like heat. They'd lost their grandmother. I'd lost everything. Person after person came up to me offering condolences, and I could see the calculation in Victoria's eyes as she watched me accept their sympathy. Even in grief, I was supposed to be gracious, composed, grateful for the years I'd had. My grief was treated as something performative, excessive, attention-seeking. "Elena wouldn't want you making a scene," Victoria murmured as I sobbed quietly during the service. Making a scene, as if crying at your mother's funeral was inappropriate. 3 days later, I sat in a lawyer's office, still wearing the black dress Elena had bought me for job interviews. I'd worn it to the funeral because it was the only formal black dress I owned. And now I was wearing it again because I hadn't had the energy to change. The lawyer, an older man named Mr. Patterson, who'd known Elena for decades, looked uncomfortable as he prepared to read the will. He kept glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Pity, maybe, or apology. Richard sat across from me, his face a mask of appropriate solemnity. Victoria was beside him, her posture perfect, her expression neutral. Jennifer sat to my left, checking her phone intermittently. Philip was on my right, staring at the ceiling like he'd rather be anywhere else. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. "Let's begin. This is the last will and testament of Elena Marie Steele, dated February 14th of this year." 6 weeks ago. Elena had updated her will 6 weeks ago, when she must have known she was dying. The reading proceeded exactly as I'd expected. The estate went to Richard. The substantial investment portfolio was divided between Jennifer and Philip. Elena's jewelry collection, her artwork, her furniture, everything was distributed among her biological family with careful specificity. "And to Danielle Steele," Mr. Patterson continued, and I felt my heart lift despite everything, desperately hoping for something, anything that proved I'd mattered to her. The lawyer paused, his discomfort visible. "Elena leaves the complete contents of safety deposit box number 447 at First National Bank." Silence filled the office like water filling a sinking ship. Then Jennifer laughed, a sharp bark of sound that made me flinch. "A safety deposit box? That's it? What's in there? Old photographs?" Mr. Patterson's eyes met mine, and I saw something in them that made my breath catch. Knowledge, warning, something that suggested the contents of that box mattered more than anyone in this room understood. "The contents of the box are confidential," he said carefully. "Danielle will need to access it herself with the key." My hand went automatically to my neck, to the silver chain I'd worn for 16 years. The key Elena had given me when I was 8, telling me I'd know when I needed it. I'd know when I needed it. "Is that all?" Victoria's voice was crisp, businesslike. "For Danielle, I mean?" "That's all that's specified in the will, yes." I felt my cheeks burning with humiliation, felt the weight of their judgment pressing down on me like a physical thing. 18 years in this family, and I was worth a safety deposit box, while Jennifer and Philip inherited millions. But Mr. Patterson was still looking at me with that strange expression, like he was trying to tell me something he couldn't say out loud. Whatever was in that box, it was important. I just had no idea it would be the key to destroying everything the Steele family had built on lies. The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and lemon polish. Mr. Patterson closed the will with a soft snap that echoed louder than Jennifer's laugh. I sat there in my black interview dress, the one Elena had picked out because it made me look capable and kind, and felt the room tilt. Estate to Richard. Investments split between Jennifer and Philip. Jewelry, artwork, furniture, all catalogued and claimed. My name appeared once, attached to a safety deposit box like an afterthought. Jennifer leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. A box? That's it? What, like a shoebox of Grandma's buttons? Victoria's eyes flicked to her daughter, sharp enough to cut glass, then smoothed into polite concern. Richard adjusted his cufflinks and said nothing. Mr. Patterson avoided my gaze entirely. I touched the key under my collar, the metal warm from my skin. 18 years. One line in a will. The next morning, Richard summoned me to his office. Not the cozy study where Elena used to read me fairy tales. This was the one with the leather chairs and the view of the rose garden Victoria guarded like a dragon. He didn't offer me a seat. Your arrangement with my mother has concluded, he said, voice flat as the mahogany desk between us. The guardianship was never formalized into adoption. Legally, you have no claim here. Victoria stood behind him, arms folded, lips pressed into a line that wasn't quite a smile. Triumph looked good on her, like a tailored coat. Guardianship, I repeated. The word tasted wrong. Elena called it adoption. She had a ceremony. Sentiment, Victoria cut in. Elena was sentimental. The paperwork says temporary guardian. You were always meant to transition out at 18. She simply delayed. Richard slid a folder across the desk. Inside, a single sheet titled Notice to Vacate. 7 days. I stared at the date stamped in red. 7 days? We're generous, Victoria said. Most landlords give 30. That night I packed 2 suitcases, 1 backpack. My debate trophies fit in a shoebox. The framed photo of Elena and me at my high school graduation went in last, wrapped in the sweater she'd knitted senior year. Jennifer hovered in the doorway, phone in hand. Finally getting what you deserve, she said, filming me like this was content. The help's exit interview. Philip carried the bags downstairs without a word. He loaded them into Elena's old Volvo, the one concession they allowed, probably because it was 15 years old and smelled like her lavender sachets. Victoria waited on the front steps, coat buttoned, despite the mild spring air. Elena's sentimentality doesn't entitle you to our name, she said as I slid behind the wheel. Drive safely. The gates closed behind me with a clang that sounded final. I drove on autopilot, tears blurring the windshield wipers. The bank was 20 minutes away, but I didn't remember the turns. First National's lobby was quiet, all marble and hushed voices. The manager, Mrs. Delgado, recognized me from Elena's visits. Her eyes softened. Box 447, I said, voice cracking. I have the key. She led me to the vault. The box was heavier than I expected. Inside, a manila folder thick as a novel, a USB drive in a plastic case, and a sealed envelope in Elena's handwriting. My dearest Danielle, if you're reading this, I've failed you. I'm so sorry. The cancer came faster than the doctors predicted, and I ran out of time to fix what I broke. Your mother was Lydia Foster, my Lydia, the girl who shared secrets and dreams in the back of a yellow school bus. We were sisters in every way that mattered. She died hours after you were born, complications no one saw coming. Her last words were a promise, raise you as my own. She left an $8 million trust, meant to be yours at 25. I've managed it faithfully, but my family discovered the money. Richard needed liquidity for a development deal. Victoria saw an opportunity. They've been pressuring me for years, forging signatures, moving funds into the foundation. I fought them in court filings they buried, in journal entries they dismissed as senile ramblings. I updated my will 6 weeks ago, hoping the box would protect you when I couldn't. The documents prove everything. The USB holds recordings, conversations where Victoria admits the plan to transition you out once the trust transferred. Use them wisely. You were never temporary to me. All my love, forever. Elena. I flipped through the folder with shaking hands. Bank statements showed the trust balance dwindling. 8 mm to 6.2 mm to 3.1 funneled into Steel Foundation orphanage initiatives that didn't exist. Forged transfer authorizations bore Elena's signature, shaky imitations any expert would spot. Her journal pages were dated, meticulous. Victoria threatening to contest the will if Elena didn't sign, Richard promising the money would benefit the family legacy. Photos spilled out. Elena and Lydia at 16, arms around each other at a county fair, cotton candy sticky on their fingers. My original birth certificate listed Lydia Foster as mother, father unknown. No mention of Steele's anywhere. They hadn't just thrown me out. They'd stolen my inheritance to hide the theft. My phone buzzed on the metal table. Unknown number. I almost let it ring out. Miss Foster? The voice was crisp. Official. This is Special Agent Harlan, IRS Criminal Investigations. We've been monitoring irregular transfers from the Steel Foundation. Your name came up in connection with a trust fund. We'd like to schedule an interview. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles whitened. The eviction notice was dated the same day Elena's doctor confirmed her heart failure. They didn't just want me gone. They needed me gone before the money trail led back to them. I looked at the USB in my palm, small and black, and full of their downfall. Tomorrow, I said. I'll bring everything. Chapter 4. The Eviction and the Key. I spent that night in my childhood bedroom, unable to sleep, staring at the key around my neck and trying to understand what Elena had been trying to tell me. The silence in the house felt different now, heavier, like the building itself was holding its breath. The knock on my door came at 8 the next morning, 3 sharp raps, official and cold. Danielle, your father would like to see you in his office. Victoria's voice carried through the door, and something about the way she said your father felt deliberate, pointed. A reminder that Richard wasn't actually my father, that I had no real claim to any of them. I dressed quickly, my hands shaking as I pulled on jeans and a sweater. The key thumped against my chest with each heartbeat, a reminder of something I didn't yet understand. Richard's office was on the first floor. A room I'd only been inside a handful of times in 18 years. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, the smell of expensive cigars and older money. He sat behind his desk like a judge preparing to deliver a sentence. Victoria stood by the window, her back to me, but I could feel her satisfaction radiating across the room. Sit down, Danielle. Richard gestured to the chair across from his desk without looking at me. I sat, my stomach twisting into knots. Your arrangement with Elena has ended, Richard said, his voice flat and businesslike, like he was discussing a contract termination rather than throwing out a girl who'd lived under his roof for 18 years. We need you to vacate the premises by the end of the week. The words didn't process at first. My arrangement? You were never formally adopted, Danielle. Victoria turned from the window, and I finally saw the expression on her face. Triumph. Pure, undisguised triumph. Elena brought you here under a guardian arrangement, but the legal paperwork was never finalized. You have no claim to the Steele name or any inheritance beyond what was specifically mentioned in the will. But I've been here since I was 6. My voice came out small, childlike, exactly the way I'd trained myself not to sound. This is my home. This is our home, Victoria corrected, her tone sharp enough to cut. Elena's sentimentality doesn't change the legal reality. You were always meant to be temporary. Temporary. 18 years, and I'd been temporary. I don't understand. I looked at Richard, desperately hoping to see some hint of compassion in his face. Elena said I was adopted. She had a ceremony. There were papers. There was a ceremony, yes. Elena wanted that for you. Richard shuffled papers on his desk, not meeting my eyes. But the final adoption decree was never processed. She kept meaning to handle it, but there were complications, legal issues. It simply never happened. Legal issues. 18 years of legal issues that somehow never got resolved. You have 1 week to collect your belongings and make arrangements for alternative housing, Richard continued. We'll allow you to take personal items, clothing, that sort of thing. The Volvo is yours. Elena specifically wanted you to have it. Beyond that, I think we've been more than generous over the years. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process what was happening. They were throwing me out. 3 days after Elena's funeral, they were throwing me out like I was trash they'd been too polite to dispose of while she was alive. Where am I supposed to go? The question came out as a whisper. Victoria's smile was thin and cold. That's not really our concern anymore, is it? You're 24 years old, Danielle. You have a college degree. I'm sure you'll figure something out. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to ask how they could be so cruel, how they could do this to someone who'd lived under their roof for nearly 2 decades. But the words stuck in my throat, choked by years of training myself to be grateful, accommodating, never demanding more than I was given. 1 week, Richard said, his tone suggesting the meeting was over. I trust that's sufficient time. I stood on shaking legs and walked out of his office, feeling like I was moving through water. Everything seemed distant, unreal. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. But it was. I packed my entire life into 2 suitcases and a backpack over the next 3 days. 18 years of existence reduced to items I could carry. Clothes, a few books Elena had given me, the stuffed rabbit from my mother that had somehow survived all these years. The photographs I'd thought were of my family, though I left most of those behind when I realized I wasn't in half of them anyway. Jennifer appeared in my doorway on the 2nd day, watching me fold clothes into a suitcase with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not cruel exactly, but not kind either. Finally getting what you deserve, she said. Not unkindly, just matter of fact. Like this was the natural order of things being restored. I lived here for 18 years, I said, not looking at her. You stayed here for 18 years, Jennifer corrected. There's a difference. Elena wanted you here. The rest of us were just being polite. She left without another word, and I continued packing with tears streaming down my face, trying not to think about all the years I'd spent trying to make her like me, trying to be the sister I thought she wanted. Philip helped me carry my bags to Elena's old Volvo on my last day. It was more kindness than I'd expected from him, and I couldn't tell if it was genuine compassion or just a desire to make sure I actually left. Good luck out there, he said, loading the last suitcase into the trunk. He met my eyes briefly, and I saw something that might have been guilt flicker across his face. For what it's worth, I never hated you. I just didn't know what to do with you. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I said nothing. Victoria met me at the front door for one final interaction, her expression as composed as ever. Elena's death doesn't change what you really are, she said, her voice low enough that only I could hear. You were temporary, and now your time is up. Whatever sentiment Elena felt toward you doesn't entitle you to our name or our resources. I wanted to say something cutting, something that would hurt her the way she was hurting me, but I was 24 years old and homeless, standing in front of a woman who'd spent 18 years making sure I knew I didn't belong. What could I possibly say that would matter? Instead, I got in the Volvo, started the engine, and drove away from the only home I'd ever really known. I made it 3 blocks before I had to pull over, sobbing so hard I couldn't see the road. Everything Elena had promised me, everything I'd believed about my place in that family, had been a lie, or maybe not a lie, but a promise she couldn't keep, a hope that died with her. The key around my neck felt heavier than ever. The bank was 10 minutes away. First National, where Elena had done her banking for 40 years. I walked in with swollen eyes and shaking hands, the key clutched in my palm like a lifeline. The bank manager, Mrs. Chen, recognized me immediately. She'd known Elena, had probably processed countless transactions for her over the years. The sympathy in her expression suggested she knew more than she was saying. "I'm so sorry for your loss, dear," she said, leading me to the vault. "Elena was a wonderful woman. She spoke about you often." Something about the way she said it made me wonder what exactly Elena had told her. The safety deposit box was larger than I'd expected, and heavier. Mrs. Chen helped me carry it to a private room and left me alone with whatever Elena had thought was important enough to hide from her family. Inside was a thick folder of documents, a USB drive, and a sealed envelope with my name written in Elena's shaky handwriting. The letter was on top, like she'd wanted me to read it first. My hands trembled as I opened it. "My dearest Danielle," it began. "If you're reading this, then I've failed you, and I can only pray that my family has shown you more mercy than I fear they will. There are things I should have told you years ago, say. Things I was too much of a coward to say while I was alive." I forced myself to keep reading through the tears that were already blurring the words. "You were never a charity case, sweetheart. Your mother, Lydia Foster, was my childhood best friend. We were like sisters, closer than blood. We grew up together, shared everything, promised we'd always be there for each other. When she got pregnant at 19 and the father disappeared, she had no one else. When complications during your birth left her too ill to care for you properly, she made me promise something. 'Promise me you'll raise her like your own,' she said. 'Promise me she'll never feel unwanted.'" The paper shook in my hands. Lydia Foster. My mother had a name, a history, a connection to Elena that explained everything and nothing at the same time. "I promised, Danielle. I promised your mother I would protect you, love you, give you the life she couldn't. When she died from those complications 3 years later, when you were just 3 years old, I brought you home permanently. But I made a terrible mistake. I never told my family the truth about who you really were. I let them think you were just some foster child I'd taken pity on. And by the time I realized how they were treating you, how they'd never accepted you as family, I was too much of a coward to fight them." I couldn't breathe. Every word was rewriting everything I'd thought I knew about my life. "Your mother left something for you, sweetheart. She had a small trust fund, $8 million from her parents' estate. It was supposed to be managed by me until you turned 25, then transferred entirely to you. But after she died, my family discovered the money. Victoria convinced Richard that it should be donated to our family foundation for tax purposes. They forged documents, Danielle. They stole your inheritance and built their charitable empire on your mother's money. $8 million. My inheritance. Stolen. I tried to stop them. I gathered evidence, documented everything. But Victoria threatened to destroy all proof of your mother's connection to our family, to make it look like I'd taken you illegally. She said if I exposed them, you'd be taken away, put into the system. I was weak, and I prioritized keeping you with me over seeking justice. I thought as long as I was alive, I could protect you. I was wrong. My vision blurred completely now, tears streaming down my face, as Elena's words painted a picture of corruption I'd never imagined. "Everything you need is in this box. Bank statements, forged documents, my journals documenting 20 years of their crimes. They've done this to 47 children, Danielle. Taken in orphans with trust funds, stolen their money, then removed them from our home before they could discover the truth. You were supposed to be their longest success, but my love for you complicated their plans. 47 children, 47 stories like mine. I set the letter down with shaking hands and opened the folder. Bank statements going back 24 years showing an $8 million trust in my name that had been systematically drained. Forged documents with Victoria's signature claiming the money had been voluntarily donated to the Steele Foundation. Elena's journals, page after page of dates and names and amounts. Children who'd come through the Steele household and disappeared, trust funds that had been absorbed into the foundation's accounts. There were photos, too. Elena and another woman, both young, maybe 20, arms around each other, laughing at something outside the frame. The other woman looked like me. Same eyes, same smile, same stubborn chin. My mother, Lydia Foster. My birth certificate was there, too, the real one. Mother, Lydia Ann Foster. Father, unknown. Legal guardian, Elena Marie Steele. Not adopted. Guardianship. They'd been telling the truth about that, at least. I sat in that small room for over an hour, reading through document after document, understanding growing with each page. They hadn't thrown me out because Elena died. They'd thrown me out because I was about to turn 25, and when I did, I'd have legal right to start asking questions about a trust fund they'd spent years pretending didn't exist. My phone rang, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Miss Foster? The voice was professional, official. This is Agent Bradley with the IRS Criminal Investigations Division. We've been conducting an investigation into the Steele Foundation for the past 18 months. We understand you recently came into possession of documents that might be relevant to our case. Would you be willing to meet with us? I looked down at the papers spread across the table. Evidence of fraud, theft, child exploitation spanning 2 decades. Yes, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in days. Yes, I think I would. 3 years later, that phone call would lead to federal charges, arrests, and the complete destruction of everything the Steele family had built on lies. But in that moment, sitting in a bank vault with my mother's story finally revealed, all I could think was that Elena had given me something more valuable than money. She'd given me the truth, and the truth was about to set me free. 3 years can feel like a lifetime when you're rebuilding yourself from nothing. I moved across the state to a city where nobody knew the Steele name, where I could be just Danielle Foster, not the charity case who got thrown out by one of the region's most prominent families. The apartment was small, a 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better days, but it was mine. Paid for with money from the portion of my mother's trust that Elena had managed to keep separate, the part the Steeles hadn't been able to touch. It wasn't much. About $200,000 that Elena had moved into a different account years ago, money she'd earmarked for my education. The rest, the millions that should have been mine, was still tied up in court. The Steeles' lawyers were excellent at creating delays, filing motions, making the legal process as slow and expensive as possible. They were betting I'd give up, run out of resources, disappear the way they'd always wanted me to. They didn't know I'd inherited my mother's stubbornness along with her eyes. I used that money to finish my degree and enroll in a graduate program for social work, specializing in child protective services. If I couldn't save myself 18 years ago, maybe I could save other children from families like the Steeles. It felt like purpose, like taking something broken and turning it into something useful. The therapy helped too. Twice a week sessions with Dr. Morrison, a woman in her 50s who didn't judge me for the years I'd spent trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it. She helped me understand that the Steele's rejection wasn't about my worth. It was about their capacity for love, which had always been conditional, transactional, limited to people who looked like them and shared their blood. "You survived," Dr. Morrison told me during one session. "You not only survived, you're choosing to use that survival to help others. That's not weakness, Danielle. That's extraordinary strength." I didn't feel strong most days. I felt tired and angry and still sometimes, like that 6-year-old girl clutching a stuffed rabbit and wondering why she wasn't enough. But I was building something. Slowly, painfully, I was building a life that belonged to me. The coffee shop was my refuge, a quiet place 2 blocks from campus where I could spread out case files and study without the oppressive silence of my apartment. I was there on a Tuesday morning in October, my laptop surrounded by sticky notes and highlighters, reviewing a custody case that was breaking my heart, when someone bumped my table hard enough to make everything shake. Coffee splashed across my keyboard. Brown liquid soaked into my carefully organized papers. My laptop made a concerning buzzing sound and went dark. "Oh no, oh no, no, no." The voice belonged to a man around my age, tall and lanky, with black-framed glasses sliding down his nose and genuine horror on his face. "I am so sorry. I'm the clumsiest person alive. That's not an exaggeration. It's documented fact. I once tripped over my own shoelaces and broke a server rack that cost more than my car." I stared at my ruined laptop, at the case files now illegible, and felt tears prick my eyes. I couldn't afford to replace the computer. Those files represented hours of work. "Please don't cry," the man said, looking panicked. "I will fix this, I swear. Let me buy you another coffee, and a new laptop, and maybe a car? Do you need a car? I feel like I should buy you a car." Despite everything, I laughed. It came out choked and watery, but it was a laugh. "I don't need a car." "Okay, but definitely a laptop, and coffee, and probably therapy for the trauma I just caused." He grabbed napkins from the dispenser, trying ineffectually to blot the coffee from my papers. "I'm Derek, by the way. Derek Matthews. I work in IT, which makes this whole destroying your technology thing even more embarrassing." "Danielle," I said, accepting the napkins and trying to salvage what I could. "And it's fine. Accidents happen." This level of accident should not happen to someone who looks like they're trying to save the world. He gestured at my case files, the ones labeled with case numbers and ages of children in the system. "Social work?" "Graduate student, Child Protective Services." Something shifted in his expression, a seriousness that cut through the awkward humor. "That's important work, which makes destroying your laptop even worse. Come on. There's a computer store 3 blocks from here. I'm buying you a new one right now, and I won't take no for an answer because I'll spend the rest of my life feeling guilty if you say no." He was genuine, I realized. Not charming or smooth, just genuinely horrified that he'd disrupted my work and genuinely determined to make it right. "You don't have to do that," I said, but I was already gathering my things. "I absolutely do. Also, I'm buying you lunch, and possibly dinner, and maybe breakfast tomorrow if you're willing to risk being seen in public with someone this clumsy." I looked at him, really looked at him. Rumpled button-down shirt, jeans with coffee stains on them, sneakers that had seen better days, warm eyes behind those glasses, a smile that seemed incapable of deception. "Lunch," I agreed. "Let's start with lunch." That was how it began. Derek Matthews stumbling into my life with coffee stains and awkward jokes, buying me a laptop that was better than the one he'd destroyed, taking me to lunch at a sandwich shop where he told me about his work in IT consulting and asked about my cases with genuine interest. After that, I kept seeing him at the coffee shop. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, like clockwork, he'd appear with his own laptop and a smile that suggested he was happy to see me. Later, I'd learn he was timing his visits, making sure he'd be there when I was. But at the time, it felt like serendipity. We fell into an easy friendship. He'd buy me coffee. I'd tell him about particularly difficult cases, careful never to breach confidentiality, but needing someone who'd listen to the emotional weight of the work. He'd tell me about IT projects that sounded boring, but that he made funny with his self-deprecating humor and genuine enthusiasm. His life seemed modest, comfortable, but not extravagant. He drove an older sedan that he claimed had character, meaning it made concerning noises, and the air conditioning only worked on Tuesdays. He rented a small apartment downtown, wore simple clothes from department stores, and seemed genuinely excited about happy hour appetizers and discount movie tickets. "Tell me about your family," he said one day, 6 weeks into our friendship, and I felt my walls slam up. "There's not much to tell." "That's a lie." His voice was gentle, not pushing. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to share. But I want you to know I'm here when you are ready." It took another month before I told him an edited version. The adoption that wasn't really an adoption, Elena's death, being thrown out with nowhere to go. I didn't mention the trust fund or the evidence or the 47 other children, just the emotional truth of being rejected by the only family I'd known. Derek listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as I talked. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "They don't deserve you," he finally said, his voice tight with anger I hadn't heard from him before. "They never did. You know that, right?" I shrugged, not trusting my voice. "Danielle, look at me." He waited until I met his eyes. "What they did to you says everything about who they are and nothing about who you are. You survived them. You're thriving despite them. That's not weakness. That's incredible strength." It was almost exactly what Dr. Morrison had said. But hearing it from Derek, from someone who'd chosen to spend time with me without obligation or history, meant something different. "Thank you," I whispered. "You don't have to thank me for telling you the truth." He reached across the table, hesitating before taking my hand. "I'm just grateful you trusted me enough to share it." 6 months after we met, Derek proposed in that same coffee shop where he'd destroyed my laptop. It was simple and private and perfect. No grand gestures, no public displays, just him getting down on one knee at our usual table, holding a simple ring that must have cost him a significant chunk of his IT consultant salary. "I don't have much," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "But what I have is yours. Will you marry me?" I said yes without hesitation, feeling like maybe, finally, I'd found someone who wanted me for who I was, not who I could be molded into. We got married at the courthouse 3 weeks later, just us and 2 witnesses pulled from the clerk's office. Our honeymoon was a long weekend at a cabin upstate. No internet, no distractions, just us. Derek made terrible pancakes and burned the eggs, and I'd never been happier. This was real, I thought, watching him attempt to start a fire in the cabin's fireplace. This was someone who loved me for me, without conditions, without expectations beyond being present and honest. I had no idea that the honesty part was more complicated than I thought. 6 months into our marriage, Derek came home from work early, which was unusual. He had a nervous energy that reminded me of the day we met, when he'd destroyed my laptop and bought me a replacement. "We need to talk," he said, and my stomach dropped. "Are you okay? Are we okay?" "We're fine. Better than fine. But I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you react." He took my hands, his grip tight. My name is Derek Matthews, and I do work in technology, but I don't work in IT consulting. I sold my cybersecurity company 3 years ago for $3.2 billion. I'm a billionaire, Danielle, and I've been lying to you about it since the day we met. The room seemed to tilt. What? Let me explain, please. He was talking faster now, like he'd been rehearsing this. My firm was hired by the IRS to investigate the Steele Foundation 18 months before we met. I found your case file. I saw what they did to you, saw Elena's evidence, saw everything. And when you moved here, when you started over, I wanted to meet you, just to see if you were okay, to see if you needed help. I pulled my hands away, feeling sick. You've been investigating me? Not you. Them. Always them. His voice was urgent. But then I met you, actually met you, and you were nothing like I expected. You were strong and funny and determined, and you didn't care that I was clumsy or awkward or that my car made weird noises. You just cared about your work and your cases and building something good from something terrible. And I fell in love with you, Danielle. Not with the case file, not with the victim, with you. You lied to me for a year and a half. I know, I'm sorry, I wanted to tell you so many times, but I needed to be sure you loved me, not my money. After what the Steeles did, after the way they used you for your trust fund, I needed to know you wanted Derek the person, not Derek the billionaire. I stood up, pacing the small living room. You should have told me. You're right, I should have. But would you have married me if you'd known? Would you have trusted that my feelings were real and not just some rich guy's guilt project? The question hung between us, and I hated that I didn't know the answer. After the Steeles, after learning that my entire childhood had been about money they'd stolen from me, would I have believed a billionaire who claimed to love me for myself? I don't know, I admitted. That's why I waited. That's why I wanted you to know me first, to trust me first, to love me without the money complicating everything. He moved closer but didn't touch me. I'm sorry I lied, but I'm not sorry I fell in love with you, and I'm not sorry I married you. Those are the two most honest things I've ever done. I looked at my husband, this man who'd stumbled into my life with coffee stains and awkward jokes, who'd supported me through bad days and celebrated small victories, who'd loved me when I still wasn't sure I was worth loving. Show me, I said finally. Show me everything. The investigation, the files, all of it. No more secrets. Relief flooded his face. Okay, yes, I have copies of everything at my real office. Your real office? The 40-story building downtown. Titan Guard security. I own it. Of course he did. That night, Derek showed me 3 years of investigation work. Documents I'd given the IRS, supplemented by forensic accounting, testimony from other victims, evidence of fraud spanning 2 decades. The case against the Steele Foundation was airtight, overwhelming, devastating. They're planning a major gala next month, Derek said, pulling up a file. Their biggest fundraiser of the year. The IRS wants to make the case public, arrest them in front of donors and press. Maximum impact, maximum exposure. My heart was pounding. And you want me to be there? No. I want you to have the choice to be there. He pulled up another file. Your social work supervisor just got assigned to evaluate a custody case at the Steele estate. She doesn't know about your history with them. If you take the case, if you go to that gala, you'll be walking back into everything you escaped. I looked at the files, at years of evidence that would finally bring the Steeles to justice. When is it? I asked. 3 weeks. 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks until I walked back into the house that had never been my home, wearing a uniform that said I'd never belonged there, carrying evidence that would destroy everything they'd built. I'll do it, I said, but I'm not going alone. Derek smiled, and I saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. I was hoping you'd say that. I've always wanted to land a jet on someone's rose garden. Monday morning, my supervisor Janet called me into her office with the kind of smile that meant she was about to give me an assignment she thought I'd be excited about. "I have something special for you," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "High-profile custody evaluation at the Steele estate. You know them, right? The Steele Foundation? They do incredible work with adoption advocacy." The room tilted. I gripped the arms of the chair, trying to keep my expression neutral, but Janet knew me well enough to see through it. "Danielle? What's wrong?" My voice came out strangled. I cleared my throat and tried again. "I can't take that case." Janet's smile faded into concern. "Why not? Is there a conflict of interest I should know about?" I'd never told anyone at work about my history with the Steeles. I'd changed my name, moved across the state, built a completely new identity. Nobody here knew that Danielle Foster used to be Danielle Steele, the charity case thrown out 3 years ago. "I grew up in that house," I said quietly. "Elena Steele was my guardian. When she died, the family evicted me. There's significant history there that would compromise my objectivity." Janet's expression shifted from concern to understanding, then to something harder. "The Steele family, the ones who do all that adoption work." "Yes. And they threw you out after your guardian died." "Yes." She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming on her desk. "You can recuse yourself if you need to. I can assign it to Michael or Sandra. But Danielle, this is a significant case. There are questions about their current placement practices. If you have personal knowledge of how that family operates, that could be valuable. It could also be seen as bias. It could be seen as expertise." Janet leaned forward. "I'm not going to pressure you. This is entirely your choice. But if you think you can handle it professionally, if you think you can evaluate this case objectively despite your history, then you're the person I want on it." I thought about the 47 children in Elena's journals, the pattern of theft and abandonment that had repeated for 2 decades, the fact that the Steeles were still taking in vulnerable children, still operating under the guise of charity, while stealing from kids who had no one to protect them. "I'll do it," I said, "but I need to disclose my history in my report. Full transparency." "Agreed. The evaluation is scheduled for their annual gala this Friday. They're hosting a major fundraiser and want the evaluation conducted then to show donors how well integrated their current placements are." Janet's expression was wry. "Very convenient timing for them. Very convenient indeed." That night, I told Derek about the assignment. He was in his actual office, the one on the top floor of the Titan Guard building, with views of the entire city, surrounded by monitors displaying financial data and investigation files. "This is it," he said, pulling up documents on the main screen. "This is the opportunity we've been waiting for." He showed me the full scope of the investigation, details I hadn't seen before. 47 documented cases over 20 years, each following the same pattern: a child with a deceased parent or parents, a substantial trust fund, the Steeles taking them in under the guise of charity. Then, before the child turned 18, before they could start asking questions about their inheritance, they'd be rehomed to other families or aged out of the system entirely. "Victoria orchestrated everything," Derek explained, clicking through financial records. "She married into the family when Richard's real estate business was failing. She discovered Elena's work with foster children and saw an opportunity. She researched which kids had trust funds, convinced Elena to take them in, then systematically stole their money through forged documents and fraudulent donations to the foundation." "And Richard knew?" "Richard signed the documents. He authorized the transfers. He's as guilty as she is." Derek pulled up more files. Jennifer and Philip both benefit directly. Their lifestyles, their businesses, everything is funded by stolen money. They knew Danielle. They all knew what you were, not a family member, not even really a charity case. Just a revenue stream that Elena got too attached to. I felt sick, but I also felt something else. Clarity. Purpose. What's the plan? Derek's smile was sharp. The FBI is ready to move. They've been waiting for the perfect moment, something public and documented with plenty of witnesses. This gala gives them exactly that. 200 donors, press coverage, politicians, business leaders. When the Steeles go down, everyone will see it. He pulled up a schematic of the estate, marking positions. Federal agents will be positioned throughout the property in plain clothes. Your supervisor doesn't know this, but several of the catering staff are actually agents. You'll have a recording device that looks like a name tag. Everything Victoria says to you will be documented. What about you? I make my entrance after you're inside, loud, dramatic, impossible to ignore. It'll force everyone into the ballroom where they can't escape. He looked at me, his expression serious. Your role is to be professional. Do your job. Let them reveal themselves. Don't confront them. Don't accuse them. Just be present and let their true nature show. Let them think they've won, I said softly. Exactly. Then we show them the truth. The week that followed was the longest of my life. Dr. Morrison helped me process what was coming, the fear and anticipation and strange grief of walking back into a place that had hurt me so deeply. You're not the same person who left that house, she reminded me. You're not powerless anymore. You're not alone, and you're not doing this for revenge. You're doing this for justice, for those 47 children who deserved better. Derek's legal team briefed me on what to expect, what questions I could answer, what I couldn't. They reminded me that I was there in a professional capacity, that my personal history didn't change my obligation to evaluate the current placement fairly and objectively. But if they treat you poorly, the lead attorney said, if they do anything that demonstrates their character, let it happen. Document everything. The night before the gala, I couldn't sleep. Derek held me while I cried, while I processed 18 years of hurt and 3 years of healing, while I prepared to face people who'd made me feel worthless. You're not alone this time, he whispered. I'll be right there. And this time, you're the one with the power. Friday morning, I dressed in my most professional outfit. Black slacks, white blouse, blazer. Simple, authoritative, appropriate for a custody evaluation. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Not the scared girl who'd been thrown out 3 years ago. Someone stronger. Someone who'd survived and built something meaningful from the wreckage. The drive to the Steele estate took 40 minutes. Every mile brought back memories. Elena reading to me at bedtime. Victoria's cold smile. Richard's indifference. The feeling of never quite belonging but always desperately trying. The estate looked exactly the same. Imposing white columns, manicured gardens, the long driveway lined with oak trees that had witnessed 18 years of my slow heartbreak. I stopped at the security checkpoint, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Name? The guard asked. Danielle Foster. I'm the social worker assigned to evaluate the custody case. He checked his clipboard, frowned, picked up his radio. I have a Danielle Foster here. Says she's with social services. Static, then a voice I'd know anywhere. Victoria, sharp and cold even through the radio's distortion. Send her to the service entrance. The guard looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, she says she's here for official business. I heard what she said. Service entrance. Now. He gave me an apologetic look and pointed around the side of the house. Service entrance is on the east side. Follow the drive around. I followed it, my stomach churning with humiliation and anger. They knew I was coming. Janet had confirmed my assignment days ago. This wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate. The service entrance led to the kitchen, where catering staff were rushing to prepare for the evening's gala. A harried woman with a headset spotted me immediately. "Thank God you're here," she said, thrusting an apron at me. "We're short-staffed and the guests arrive in 2 hours. You can start with the champagne service." "I'm not here to cater," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I'm a social worker. I have an appointment." "Right, and I'm the Queen of England." She pushed the apron into my hands. "Look, I don't have time for this. We're drowning here. Put on the uniform and get to work." Before I could argue further, the kitchen door swung open. Victoria stood there, perfectly composed in an elegant navy dress, her expression the same calculated coldness I remembered. "Perfect," she said, looking me up and down. "You can make yourself useful for once." "Mrs. Steele, I'm here in a professional capacity to conduct a custody evaluation. And you'll have plenty of time for that later. Right now we have a gala to prepare for, and as you can see, we're short-staffed." Her smile was sharp. "Unless you'd like me to call your supervisor and explain that you're refusing to be helpful during a crisis? I'm sure Janet would be very interested to know about your lack of flexibility." It was a threat, thinly veiled. Cause problems, make waves, and Victoria would find a way to damage my professional reputation, just like she'd damaged everything else about my life. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek. "I see what's happening. Stick to the plan. Let them reveal themselves." Right. This was part of it. Let them show who they really were. Let them document their own cruelty. "Of course," I said, taking the apron. "I'm happy to help." Victoria's smile widened. "I thought you might be. The uniform is in the back. Make sure you're presentable. We have very important guests tonight." She left, and I stood there holding the apron, feeling the weight of 3 years of healing threatening to crack under the pressure of being back in this place, being treated like I was still that powerless girl they could dismiss. But I wasn't powerless anymore. I changed into the server's uniform, buttoning it with steady hands. The recording device Derek's team had given me was disguised as a name tag, already capturing everything. Federal agents were positioned throughout the property. My husband was about to land a private jet on their lawn. Let them underestimate me. Let them think I was still the girl who'd take their abuse without fighting back. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The gala was already underway when I emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of champagne glasses. The ballroom looked exactly as I remembered, elegant and cold, filled with wealthy people celebrating a foundation built on stolen childhoods. I moved through the crowd, invisible in my uniform, watching Richard shake hands with donors, watching Jennifer pose for photographs, watching Philip laugh with old friends. They didn't even notice me. 3 years ago, they'd thrown me out and assumed I'd disappear. Now I was back, and they couldn't even be bothered to register my presence. Victoria took the microphone at the front of the room, her smile bright and warm, the perfect philanthropist addressing her supporters. "Welcome to the 20th Annual Steele Foundation Gala," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "Tonight, we celebrate 20 years of giving vulnerable children loving homes, of providing stability and support to those who need it most. Thanks to your generosity, we've helped 47 children find their forever families." 47. She said it like it was something to be proud of. I was setting down my tray when my earpiece crackled to life. The security guard's voice, shocked and confused. "Ma'am, your husband has just landed on the front lawn." Through the windows, I saw it. The Gulf Stream descending onto the gardens, wheels tearing through Victoria's prized rose bushes, the most dramatic entrance anyone had ever made to a charity gala. Victoria's speech stumbled. Guests rushed to the windows. The perfect evening she'd orchestrated was about to become something very different, and I was ready. The Gulfstream G650 descended like judgment itself, massive and impossible to ignore, its wheels touching down on the immaculate front lawn with enough force to send rose petals exploding into the air like shrapnel. The outdoor cocktail setup, carefully arranged tables and chairs positioned among Victoria's prized gardens, collapsed under the jet's wake. $50,000 worth of landscaping destroyed in seconds. The classical quartet stopped mid-song, bow scraping discordantly across strings. Guests abandoned their champagne and rushed to the windows, phones already out, capturing what would become the most viral moment of the decade in our city's social circles. Victoria's face went through a spectacular transformation. Shock first, her mouth dropping open as she watched her perfect evening literally torn apart. Then rage, pure and incandescent, her carefully maintained composure shattering like glass. "What the hell is going on?" Richard's voice cut through the chaos, loud enough to carry across the ballroom. He was already moving toward the exit, toward the gardens where his security team was presumably panicking. But Victoria's eyes found me through the crowd. Standing there in my server's uniform, tray abandoned on a nearby table, watching the jet's door begin to open, and I saw the exact moment she understood. "You!" she hissed, already moving toward the kitchen with deadly purpose. I followed, my heart pounding but my hands steady. Everything was going according to plan. Better than planned, actually. Derek's entrance was even more dramatic than we'd discussed. Victoria burst through the kitchen door, her heels clicking sharply on the tile. "Who authorized a landing? Get security! I want that aircraft removed immediately!" The catering staff scattered, and several of them, I noticed, moved with the purposeful efficiency of people who were actually federal agents in disguise. But Victoria was too focused on me to notice. She spotted me properly for the first time all evening, really looked at me, and did a double take of recognition that would have been comical if it wasn't so satisfying. "You!" Her voice dropped to something venomous. "I should have known you'd find some way to embarrass yourself. What did you do? Call in some kind of favor? This is exactly the kind of desperate attention-seeking behavior I'd expect from someone like you." I kept my voice calm, professional, the tone I'd practiced with Dr. Morrison for weeks. "I'm here on official business, Mrs. Steele, conducting a custody evaluation, as your foundation was informed." "Official?" She gestured at my uniform with disgust. "You're wearing a serving uniform. You're exactly where you've always belonged, serving your betters." "Yes, I am wearing a uniform, because when I arrived for my professional appointment, you had me redirected to the service entrance." I kept my expression neutral. "Why was that, Mrs. Steele?" Her anger was overriding her caution now, the mask she wore for donors and press falling away to reveal the woman I'd known for 18 years. "Because that's where you belong. You were never family. Danielle, the arrangement with Elena ended when she died. You have no legal standing, no claim to our name or our property." "Our name?" I touched the name tag on my uniform, the one that was recording every word. "I'm not a Steele. I haven't been for 3 years. I'm a Foster now." Victoria's expression flickered with confusion. "What?" "Foster, my mother's name. Lydia Foster, the woman Elena promised to honor by raising her daughter as her own, the woman whose trust fund you stole to build this empire." Her face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Everything you've said in the last 3 minutes has been documented." I tapped the recording device, watching understanding dawn in her eyes. "This name tag is a recording device, single-party consent state, so perfectly legal. You just admitted on record that I was never family, that you intentionally humiliated me by forcing me into a service role, that you believe I don't belong here. That's illegal! Her voice was shrill now, panicked. Actually, as I just mentioned, it's perfectly legal in this state. But threatening a social worker conducting an official evaluation? That's less legal. Making false statements about custody practices? Also problematic. I smiled, and it felt like power. You'll regret this, Victoria said, but her voice was shaking. We have lawyers, very good lawyers. So do I. And investigators. And federal agents. I gestured toward the window, where Derek's jet door was now fully open, stairs deploying. And my husband. Victoria's head whipped toward the window. A man was descending the stairs, tall and confident in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than every server's uniform in this kitchen combined. Behind him, more figures emerged. Dark suits, badges visible even from this distance, and people carrying boxes, lots of boxes, the kind that held evidence. Who is that? Victoria whispered. Derek Matthews, CEO of Titan Guard Security. Maybe you've heard of it? One of the largest cybersecurity and forensic investigation firms in North America? I kept my voice conversational. Also, he's my husband. We've been married for 1.5 years. Through the window, I watched Derek walk through the destroyed garden toward the house, his stride purposeful and unhurried. Guests parted for him and his entourage like the sea before Moses. A photographer, pre-arranged by Derek's team and posing as press for the gala, was capturing everything. Richard appeared at the garden entrance, trying to intercept them. Sir, this is private property. You can't just land an aircraft on our lawn. An FBI agent stepped forward, badge held high. Special Agent Rivera, Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have authorization for this operation, Mr. Steele. You and your family are under investigation for fraud, theft, and child exploitation. The words carried clearly through the open doors. Guests in the ballroom went silent, conversations dying mid-sentence as they processed what they'd just heard. Jennifer and Philip stood frozen near the silent auction display, their faces identical masks of growing panic. Philip pulled out his phone, probably calling his lawyer. Jennifer looked like she might be sick. Donors were whispering now, phones out, recording everything. This was exactly what Derek had planned. Public, documented, impossible to hide or spin. Victoria turned back to me, and I saw real fear in her eyes for the first time. What did you do? I told the truth, finally. I removed the apron, folding it neatly, and setting it on the counter. Elena tried to tell the truth for years, but you threatened her. You made her choose between exposing you and keeping me. She chose me, but she also kept every piece of evidence she could gather. 47 children, Victoria. 47 trust funds stolen. 20 years of fraud, all documented in journals and bank statements and forged documents. The kitchen door swung open. Derek stood there, his eyes finding mine immediately. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands gentle as he removed the name tag recording device and set it aside. You don't serve here, he said softly, loud enough for everyone in the kitchen to hear. You never did. He took my hand and led me toward the ballroom. Victoria tried to block our path, but an FBI agent stepped smoothly between us. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stay here. We have questions for you. The ballroom was chaos barely contained. 200 guests watching as Derek Matthews, a name everyone in this room would recognize, walked through their charity gala with federal agents and boxes of evidence. He led me to the front of the room, where Victoria had been standing just minutes ago giving her speech about helping vulnerable children. An agent took the microphone from the podium, handed it to Derek. The room went absolutely silent. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the dramatic entrance. Derek's voice carried across the ballroom with the confidence of someone who'd given presentations to Fortune 500 boards and congressional committees. My name is Derek Matthews, CEO of Titan Guard Security. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew that name. Titan Guard had contracts with 3 government agencies and half the major corporations in the country. I'm here because this foundation is built on fraud. He gestured to the agents behind him, to the boxes of evidence they were already setting up on tables. For 20 years, the Steele family has been taking in orphan children with trust funds, forging documents to steal their inheritances, and then removing those children from their home before they could discover the truth. We have documented evidence of 47 cases. 47 children whose lives and money were stolen by the people you've been celebrating tonight. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Phones were everywhere now, recording, live streaming. This was going to be national news within the hour. And the woman they just forced into a servant's uniform, Derek continued, his voice hardening. The woman they treated like she was invisible, like she was beneath them, is my wife. Danielle Foster. She was one of those 47 children. Victoria burst into the ballroom from the kitchen, her composure completely shattered. This is slander! Security! I want these people removed immediately! The FBI agent who'd stopped her in the kitchen was right behind her. Actually, ma'am, it's evidence, and you're under federal investigation. I'm going to need you to stop talking and come with us. Richard was already being escorted by other agents. Jennifer was crying, mascara running down her face as an agent read her rights. Philip stood with his hands behind his back, being handcuffed, his face blank with shock. Derek squeezed my hand. You okay? I looked at the Steele family, at the donors who were now seeing them for what they really were. At the empire built on stolen childhoods that was crumbling in real time. I'm perfect, I said. Let's show them everything. And we did. For the next 2 hours, as FBI agents took statements and reporters arrived, and the story exploded across social media, Derek's forensic accountants displayed evidence on the ballroom's projection screens. Bank statements showing trust funds drained into foundation accounts. Forged documents with Victoria's signature, Elena's journals, her words finally exposing the truth she'd been too afraid to speak while alive. One by one, other victims started coming forward. Adults now, who'd been children in the Steele household years ago, who'd been removed before they could ask questions about inheritances that had disappeared. Their faces appeared on screens as they called in, adding their testimonies to mine, confirming the pattern that had repeated for 2 decades. The Steeles had wanted to make me disappear 3 years ago. Instead, they were the ones disappearing, into handcuffs, into federal custody, into the public exposure they'd spent 20 years avoiding. Victoria's last words as they led her out in handcuffs were directed at me. You ungrateful little... Ma'am, the FBI agent interrupted. You have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you use it. I watched them go, feeling Derek's hand steady in mine, and realized I wasn't just free of them. I was finally, truly home. Not in a house or a name, but in my own strength, my own truth, my own worth. They'd tried to make me nothing. Instead, I'd become the one who brought everything they'd built crashing down. Justice didn't just arrive in a private jet. It arrived when you decided you were worth fighting for. Derek's forensic accounting team worked with military precision, transforming the Steele Foundation's elegant gala into a presentation of their crimes. Screens were erected where the silent auction had been. Projectors cast evidence onto walls that had displayed the family's philanthropic awards. The same technology they'd used to celebrate themselves would now expose them. The first image appeared on the main screen, a bank statement from 2003 showing a trust fund in the name of Michael Chen, age 7, orphaned $800,000. Next to it, a forged document dated 6 months later claiming the trust had been voluntarily donated to the Steele Foundation. Victoria's signature at the bottom, notarized by someone whose license had been suspended for fraud. Michael Chen lived with the Steele family for 11 months, Derek's lead investigator explained to the stunned crowd. Then he was transferred to a group home in another state. He aged out of the system at 18 with nothing. No trust fund, no college fund, no inheritance from his parents. The Steeles kept the money. Another image. Sarah Park, age 9, $1.2 million. The same pattern. Forged documents, Victoria's signature, money disappearing into foundation accounts. Guest after guest, donors who'd written checks thinking they were helping children, watched their charitable contributions fund a theft operation spanning 2 decades. 47 faces appeared on screen. 47 children who'd passed through the Steele household. 47 trust funds that had vanished. The timeline was damning. 2003 to 2023, an unbroken pattern. Taken child, access trust, forged documents, remove child, repeat. The foundation's growth tracked perfectly with the thefts. Every major expansion, every new program, funded by money stolen from orphans. "My turn," I said quietly to Derek. He handed me the microphone, his hand squeezing mine once before letting go. I walked to the center of the ballroom, to the spot where Victoria had stood an hour ago, praising their 20 years of helping vulnerable children. "My name is Danielle Foster," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "Elena Steele was my legal guardian for 18 years. Some of you may remember me as Danielle Steele before I legally changed my name after they threw me out." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Several people pulled out their phones, probably searching for photos, trying to match the girl in server's uniform to the child they might have seen at past galas. I thought I was adopted. I thought Elena chose me because she loved me. She did love me, that part was true. But what I didn't know until after her death was that my biological mother was Elena's best friend. That my mother left me an $8 million trust fund, that the Steele family forged documents to steal that money and used it to build this foundation you've all been supporting. The silence was absolute now. When Elena died 3 years ago, they gave me 1 week to leave the house I'd lived in since I was 6 years old. They told me I'd never been really adopted, that I had no legal claim to anything, that I was temporary and my time was up. What they didn't tell me was that they'd been stealing from me and from dozens of other children for 20 years. I paused, letting that sink in, but I'm not the only one. The ballroom doors opened. 6 people entered, ranging in age from mid-20s to late 30s, former Steele foster children tracked down by Derek's investigation team over the past 3 years. Each had agreed to come tonight, to tell their stories, to add their voices to the evidence. Marcus went first, a man in his 30s who'd been with the Steeles when he was 9. "They took me in after my parents died in a car accident. I had a trust fund, $400,000. I was with them for 8 months before they said the placement wasn't working out. I ended up in 3 different foster homes before I aged out at 18. No money, no support. I thought my parents just hadn't left me anything. Anna was next, a woman in her late 20s. I was 12 when I came to the Steeles. My grandmother had left me almost $1 million. Victoria was so kind at first, told me I was family now. Then 7 months later, I was being moved to a group home. They said I had behavioral problems. I didn't. I just asked too many questions about my inheritance. One by one, They told their stories. Same pattern, same lies, same theft. The donors were no longer just watching. They were witnessing a systematic crime that had used their money, their reputations, their goodwill as cover. Victoria tried to leave. She made it 3 steps toward the exit before FBI agents blocked her path. "This is a setup!" Her voice was shrill, desperate. "We've dedicated our lives to children, to helping them. Everything we've done has been for their benefit." Derek stepped forward, his voice cutting through her protests. "You've dedicated your lives to stealing from children. The evidence is irrefutable. We have bank records showing millions of dollars from trust funds deposited into accounts you control. We have forged documents with your signature. We have testimony from 47 victims." Another screen lit up. Victoria's personal bank account. Deposits over 20 years, each one traceable to a stolen trust fund. The balance at the bottom made several people gasp. $12 million, built entirely on theft from orphaned children. Richard Steele signed every document, Derek continued. He authorized every transfer. He knew exactly what his wife was doing, and he participated willingly. Richard's documents appeared on screen. His signature, his authorization, his complicity undeniable. Jennifer and Philip Steele, Derek gestured to where they stood frozen, have both benefited directly. Jennifer's art gallery, funded by stolen money. Philip's real estate investments, funded by stolen money. Their cars, their homes, their lifestyles, all built on the backs of children who trusted this family to protect them. More evidence. Purchase records, loan documents, property transfers. Everything traceable back to the foundation, back to the stolen trusts. "But there's one more thing you all need to see," I said, my voice breaking slightly. I pulled the USB drive from my pocket, the one Elena had left in the safety deposit box. Elena Steele knew what her family was doing. She tried to stop them. This is her testimony, recorded 6 weeks before she died. The screen flickered. Then Elena's face appeared. She looked small, frail, nothing like the strong woman who'd raised me. But her voice was clear. "If you're watching this, my family has likely done something terrible. They've either hurt Danielle, or they've been exposed, or both. I need you to know that I knew. I discovered what Victoria was doing 15 years ago, after the first dozen children had already been exploited." The ballroom was silent except for Elena's voice. I tried to stop them. I threatened to go to the authorities to expose everything. But Victoria is clever. She had evidence of every interaction I'd had with Lydia, with Danielle's mother. She threatened to destroy it all, to make it look like I'd taken Danielle illegally, like I was the criminal. She said if I exposed them, Danielle would be taken from me and put into the system. I would lose her, and they would continue their scheme anyway. Tears were streaming down my face now, but I didn't wipe them away. "I was a coward," Elena continued. "I prioritized my son's reputation over justice for those children. I prioritized keeping Danielle with me over protecting others. I documented everything I could, gathered evidence for years, hoping I'd find the courage to act. But I was afraid of losing her, afraid of what the truth would mean." She looked directly into the camera, and I felt like she was looking at me. "Danielle, sweetheart, you deserved better. Your mother deserved better. All those children deserved better. The evidence is in box 447. Make them pay. Please, make them pay for what they did." The video ended. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. The donor's reaction was immediate and brutal. A city councilwoman who'd been on the foundation's board stood up, her face pale. "I had no idea. None of us had any idea. How could we not have known?" "Because they were good at hiding it," Derek said. "They used your reputations, your goodwill, your genuine desire to help children as cover for systematic theft and exploitation." Phones were everywhere now. Social media was exploding. I could see guests typing frantically, posting updates, sharing the images from the screens. Within minutes, #Steel Foundation fraud was trending nationally. Other victims were already coming forward online, people we hadn't found yet, adding their stories to the growing evidence. News crews were arriving outside, drawn by the social media storm and the sight of a private jet on the front lawn. Drones captured aerial footage of the estate, the destroyed gardens, the FBI vehicles surrounding the property. Victoria Steele, Richard Steele, Jennifer Steele, Philip Steele. Agent Rivera's voice cut through the chaos. You're under arrest for fraud, grand theft, child exploitation, and tax evasion. 4 sets of handcuffs clicked shut in the ballroom where they'd hosted 20 years of galas. Victoria's face was a mask of fury and fear. Richard looked like he'd aged a decade in the last hour. Jennifer was sobbing. Philip stared at the floor, saying nothing. You have the right to remain silent, Agent Rivera continued. But Victoria couldn't help herself. She looked at me, hatred burning in her eyes. You ungrateful little— Ma'am, Agent Rivera interrupted, his voice sharp. You have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you use it. The donors watched in stunned silence as the Steele family was led out of their own gala in handcuffs. The poetic justice wasn't lost on anyone. They'd been arrested at their own celebration, exposed in front of everyone they'd tried to impress, destroyed by the very system they'd manipulated for profit. Derek took my hand. Ready to go? We walked toward the front entrance, not the service entrance, through the ballroom full of shell-shocked donors and clicking cameras. Reporters were already swarming outside, shouting questions, desperate for a statement. I paused at the door, turned back to face the cameras one last time. This is for Elena, who tried to protect me even when she was afraid. For my mother, Lydia Foster, whose memory and trust fund were stolen. And for every child who was used and discarded by people who claimed to care about vulnerable children while exploiting them for profit. The cameras flashed. Questions followed us to the car. Miss Foster, how does it feel to see them arrested? Will you be testifying at trial? What do you want to happen to the foundation? Derek opened the car door for me, shielding me from the press. We slid into the back seat, the driver already pulling away from the chaos. How do you feel? Derek asked quietly, his hand finding mine. I looked back at the estate, at the house where I'd spent 18 years trying to earn love that was never really mine to earn, at the ballroom where my past and present had collided in the most spectacular way possible, at the federal agents still processing evidence and taking statements from victims who were finally being believed. Free, I said, and felt the truth of it settle into my bones. Finally free. The car pulled away, leaving the Steele estate and everything it represented behind. I'd walked in through the service entrance, forced into a servant's role, treated like I was invisible. I was leaving through the front door, with my husband beside me, having destroyed the empire built on stolen childhoods. They'd tried to make me nothing. Instead, I'd become the one who brought everything crashing down, and that felt like justice. 5 years can build a life when you're no longer running from your past. The legal aftermath was swift and merciless. Victoria Steele was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for fraud, child exploitation, and racketeering. No parole eligibility. Richard got 12 years. His sentence reduced slightly for cooperating with investigators, though his testimony did nothing to redeem him in anyone's eyes. Jennifer and Philip avoided prison through plea deals, but their lives were destroyed anyway. Probation, community service, full restitution to victims. Their social circles evaporated overnight. The Steele name became synonymous with exploitation. The foundation was dissolved, every asset seized. $127 million recovered from accounts, properties, and investments, all of it distributed to the 47 victims. 44 were still alive. 3 had died over the years, never knowing they'd been robbed. Their families received their inheritances posthumously, along with formal apologies that felt hollow but necessary. I led the support group that formed in the aftermath. Monthly meetings, sometimes in person, sometimes virtual, bringing together adults who'd been exploited as children by people who claimed to care about vulnerable kids. We shared our stories, our anger, our healing. Some testified at the trials, their voices adding weight to the prosecution's case. The media coverage was intense but ultimately validating. For the first time, people believed us. 2 years after the arrests, I finished my law degree, specializing in children's rights and adoption fraud. The work felt like taking everything I'd survived and turning it into purpose. Dr. Morrison called it post-traumatic growth. I called it making sure no other child would go through what I had. The Steele Accountability Project launched 6 months after my graduation, a national organization funded by federal grants and private donations, dedicated to investigating adoption fraud schemes and supporting victims. We had a staff of 30, offices in cities across the country, and a helpline that never stopped ringing. Our headquarters was in the former Steele estate, purchased at auction and renovated into a training center for social workers and a safe space for adoptive families. Elena's wing was preserved as a memorial, not to the Steele family's crimes, but to her humanitarian work, the real kind she'd done before Victoria corrupted everything. Photos of her volunteering at hospitals, reading to children, the genuine kindness she'd shown before fear made her complicit. A scholarship fund in Lydia Foster's name helped adoptees pursue higher education. Everything the Steeles had built on lies was now being used to tell the truth. My marriage to Derek grew stronger through all of it. The initial deception about his identity could have destroyed us, but instead it taught us that love required honesty, even when honesty was hard. We'd been married 5 years now, and he still made me laugh with his awkward jokes and still spilled coffee on important documents with impressive regularity. We adopted 2 children, Maya, age 7, whose parents had died in a house fire and who'd spent 3 years in foster care waiting for someone to choose her, and Caleb, age 5, who'd been removed from an abusive situation and needed a family who understood that healing wasn't linear. Full legal adoption, complete transparency, and ongoing family therapy to make sure we were doing right by them. Do you love us because you have to or because you want to? Maya asked one night during bedtime stories, her voice small and uncertain. We love you because we chose you, I told her, brushing hair from her forehead. And we choose you again every single day. Not because we have to. Because we want to. Because you're ours and we're yours. And that's what family means. She smiled then, and I saw myself in her eyes. The girl who'd spent years wondering if love was something you earned or something you were given freely. You're safe here, Derek added, sitting on the other side of her bed. Always, no matter what. That's a promise. We meant it, every word. This was a different kind of family, built on truth and choice rather than blood and obligation. It wasn't perfect. Maya had nightmares. Caleb sometimes flinched when voices got too loud. But we were honest about the hard parts, and we showed up for each other even when showing up was difficult. 3 years after the trials, I was invited to testify before Congress about adoption reform. The invitation came from a bipartisan committee, senators from both parties who'd been horrified by the Steele Foundation scandal and wanted to prevent similar schemes from operating under the guise of charity. The morning of my testimony, I arrived at the Capitol in a helicopter, landing on the lawn with proper authorization and press coverage. The contrast to the service entrance at the Steele estate wasn't lost on anyone. Reporters noted it in their coverage, drawing the parallel between the woman forced into a servant's uniform and the advocate landing at the nation's capital to change federal law. I wore a Navy suit, professional and confident, carrying a folder of policy recommendations our organization had spent months developing. Other victims sat in the gallery, their presence a reminder that this wasn't just my story. It was our collective experience, 47 voices demanding change. "I'm not here for revenge," I began, my testimony broadcast live on multiple networks. "I'm here for prevention. I'm here to make sure that what happened to me and 46 other children never happens again." I spoke for 40 minutes, detailing the systematic failures that had allowed the Steele scheme to operate for 20 years. The lack of oversight for adoption-related foundations, the absence of mandatory audits, the way wealth and reputation insulated criminals from scrutiny. I presented research, data, and specific policy recommendations backed by experts in child welfare and financial crimes. The Foster-Steele Act, named for my mother and the family that had exploited her legacy, passed 6 months later with overwhelming bipartisan support. Mandatory audits for any organization handling adoptee trust funds, enhanced background checks, regular follow-up with placed children, criminal penalties severe enough to deter exploitation. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The committee gave me a standing ovation when I finished. A senator approached me afterward, shaking my hand with tears in her eyes. "Your courage has changed countless lives," she said. "Children who haven't even been born yet will be protected because of what you did." After the testimony, I drove to the cemetery where Elena was buried. First time I'd visited since her funeral 5 years earlier. I'd been too angry for years, too hurt by her complicity, even as I understood the impossible position Victoria had put her in. But standing there now, looking at her headstone, I felt something shift. "We did it," I said quietly, placing roses from the estate garden on her grave. "The evidence you left exposed them all. Victoria's in prison. The foundation is gone. And we're using everything they built on lies to help real children now." The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and I imagined it was Elena somehow hearing me, finally at peace, knowing the truth had come out. "You did your best with limited power," I continued. "I understand that now. You were afraid of losing me, and that fear made you complicit. But you also gave me the tools to fight back. The key, the evidence, the truth about my mother. Thank you for that. Thank you for loving me, even when you couldn't protect me the way you wanted to." I left the cemetery feeling lighter, like I'd finally made peace with Elena's complicated legacy. She'd failed in some ways, but she'd also given me everything I needed to succeed. Derek and the kids were waiting at the hotel when I got back. Maya threw herself at me, wrapping small arms around my waist. "Did you save more kids today, Mom?" "I hope so, sweetheart," I said, hugging her tight. "I really hope so." Caleb showed me a drawing he'd made while waiting. Our family, all 4 of us holding hands, everyone smiling. He'd used every color in his crayon box, making us bright and vivid and happy. "This is us," he said proudly. "This is us," I agreed, feeling tears prick my eyes. "This is exactly us." That evening, we ordered room service and watched a movie together. The 4 of us piled on one bed, normal and loving and safe. The family I'd always deserved, but had to build for myself. 1 year after my congressional testimony, we hosted a gala at the renovated Steele estate, not for the Steele Foundation, which no longer existed, but for the Foster-Steele Foundation, dedicated to ethical adoption practices and protecting children's rights. 200 donors attended, all carefully vetted, all genuinely committed to the cause. Victoria's rose garden had been replanted as a memorial garden for exploited children. 47 roses, one for each victim, with plaques bearing their names and the years they'd been taken advantage of. It was beautiful and heartbreaking and necessary. I stood at the front of the ballroom where Victoria had stood 5 years earlier, but everything was different now. Maya and Caleb stood beside me on stage, holding my hands. Derek sat in the front row, pride evident on his face. Former victims turned advocates filled the audience, their presence testament to resilience and healing. "This is what real family looks like," I said, my voice carrying across the room. "Not blood relations or legal documents, but people who choose each other and keep choosing each other. People who show up for each other. People who tell the truth even when it's hard." I looked down at my children, at the daughter who'd asked if we loved her because we had to or wanted to, at the son who drew pictures of our family in every color he could find. "This is what justice looks like," I continued. "Not just punishment for people who did wrong, but systemic change that prevents future harm, laws that protect instead of enabling, organizations that truly serve children instead of exploiting them." The audience was silent, listening. "And this is just the beginning," I said. "Because every child who finds a safe home, every trust fund that stays protected, every family built on truth instead of lies, that's another victory. That's another reason to keep fighting." I paused, feeling the weight of everything that had led to this moment. The pain and the healing, the betrayal and the justice, the girl I'd been and the woman I'd become. "They tried to make me invisible," I said, my voice stronger now. "Instead, they made me unstoppable." The applause was thunderous, but I barely heard it. I was looking at my family, at Derek and Maya and Caleb, at the life we'd built together, at the people in the audience who'd survived their own versions of what I'd been through and had decided to turn survival into purpose. To everyone watching who's ever felt unwanted, who's ever been told they weren't enough, who's ever wondered if they'd ever find where they belong, I said directly into the cameras recording the event. "Your story isn't over. Sometimes karma arrives in a private jet with FBI agents and evidence that destroys your enemies. But more often, it arrives when you decide you're worth fighting for, when you choose yourself, even when no one else has chosen you." I looked down at my children again, at these beautiful souls who'd been hurt by systems that should have protected them, who were learning that family could mean safety and love and permanence. "Thank you for being part of my journey," I said. "Now go write your own ending." The cameras kept rolling as we walked off stage together, my family and my purpose intertwined in ways I'd never imagined possible. If this story moved you, if you see yourself in any part of it, know that you're not alone. Share this with someone who needs to hear that survival is possible, that justice exists, that families can be chosen, and love can be real, even after everything tries to convince you otherwise. The final frame showed all of us walking across the estate grounds as the sun set behind us, casting long shadows that connected us to each other, and to the ground we'd reclaimed from people who'd tried to use it for harm. The Steele estate wasn't a place of pain anymore. It was a place of healing, of training, of truth. And that, I thought, holding my children's hands as we walked toward our car, toward home, toward whatever came next, was the best revenge of all. Not destroying them, though we'd done that too, but building something better from the ruins they'd left behind. They'd tried to erase me. Instead, I'd rewritten the entire story, and it was just the beginning. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.